Welcome back to the Go Have Good Sex podcast, the show where faith and pleasure finally stop fighting. I'm Angela, the Christian sexpert, sex coach, truth teller, and your new favorite bedtime devotional. If you're ready to go deeper, check out my resources for couples and individuals, from my free 15-minute coaching consults to spicy but faith-friendly resources like the Marriage Playdate, to my Patreon, where I teach you all the things your church aunties never told you about. And yeah, you know I've got it covered with merch, journals, bookmarks, and everything in between at thechristiansexpert.com. So whether you're here to learn, to heal, or to spice things up with scripture and sass, I'm your girl, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into today's episode, and remember, go have good sex. Hey friends, it's your girl Angela, the Christian sexpert, and today we're diving into a topic that hits every marriage, whether we name it or not, the mental load. You know, the invisible list of who's planning, remembering, and holding all the details that keep your family running. I'm joined by Erin Pritchard to talk about the Fair Play Method, a system that helps couples reclaim time, balance responsibilities, and build more partnership at home. And yeah, that usually leads directly to better sex. We'll unpack what emotional labor really looks like, why helping out isn't the same as sharing the load, and how faith fits into the conversations about fairness and equity in marriage. So go grab your husband and let's talk about what it takes to build a marriage where both partners feel seen, supported, and maybe a little turned on by the life that you're building together. Welcome back, Erin. I'm so excited that you're back. I've been dying to have this conversation.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be back.
Yes. Okay, so for listeners who aren't familiar, what is the Fair Play Method?
Fair play method is a system for making the invisible labor in your home visible and more equitably distributing that between you and your partner.
Okay, but what do you mean by making the invisible labor visible? What is invisible labor?
Invisible labor, it's all the behind the scenes stuff, right? So it's all of like the stuff that's usually kind of up in women's heads more often, but it's up in someone's head um, behind the scenes to even do the task. So, for example, like not just cleaning the bathroom, but do we have all the cleaning products? Do we have toilet paper to restock? Do we have soap to restock? If not, then I need to put that on a grocery list. I need to go to the store, but I got to clean before this day because people are coming out. It's just like all the behind the scenes stuff that goes into doing a task. So it's usually not seen because we can't see our thoughts.
But can you see the colors of the wind? Um,
Sometimes.
is that just, I don't know why that phrase struck me as Guess we're not even 5 minutes into the podcast today. The ADHD strikes. Okay.
We'll get through it.
I, okay. So I'm laughing because these are the conversations. Erin and I are so used to having these sort of conversations because these are the sort of conversations that we have on a consistent basis. These are the Erin is much better about not fighting on the internet than I am, but these are the sorts of fights that I have in my comment sections all the time. So all I'm left with is sass when it comes to this topic. But to be fair, I don't know if I ever don't have sass for things. Anyhow, so what I when I first heard of fair play, I was like, this is magical.
Mhm.
But I would love to know what originally drew you to the fair play method, especially because you are primarily a trauma therapist. Like trauma is when you and I first connected, I said, I don't do therapy because I don't want to do the trauma. And you were like, send them to me. That's my jam. And
Yeah.
so I, I mean, I personally can see where trauma and fair play kind of can coexist in the same space, but it's not like that's not immediately obvious to people. So What's the story here?
Yeah, I think that it more so goes along with my couples work and my sex therapy work, but I think trauma can play a role in how are we coming to this idea of whose responsibility is the mental load, or being able to speak up if that's a concern between you and your partner, and feeling like you can confidently speak up and make your needs known. So I think trauma can play a role, but primarily I use this with my couples and my sex therapy work because it kind of ties directly to that.
Okay. I think part of the reason that this conversation is so necessary, especially in evangelical circles, is because of the narratives that we have, that evangelical men and women, but women in particular, have been fed from the time that we were young. And I see this happening over and over again in like Facebook groups and Instagram comments and things. Things like we're being told, women, you are the heart of your home. Your husband's job is to go out and provide for your family. And oh, the what's the meme that's been circling this week? Have you seen it?
Probably
Different
not.
job, different. We, I make sure that we have toilet paper and ketchup, and he brings home the bacon. He doesn't know how much money we have in our bank account, but he's the one that puts it there. Different roles, just as important,
Yeah.
right? So it's all of this sort of hashtag trad wife narrative.
Mhm.
And, like the man is the protector and provider, and he shouldn't have to do domestic labor. That's not God's call for him. How do you respond to all of this?
Yeah, some of that is admittedly outside of my scope. Because to some degree, that's between you and the Lord, and really is going to boil down to your own theology of a lot of different things. So, but in general, I mean, what you're describing is more of a complementarian view, right? And fair play really works better and is more designed to be more egalitarian. So if people aren't coming in with an idea of at least a little bit of wiggle room on that, it's probably not going to be effective for them if you are just really, really clinging tight to some of those really strict and rigid gender roles. Um, yeah, I'll pause for a second. I feel like can you repeat part of the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I totally get what you're saying. Where, if but I think also what I'm hearing you say is if a couple is in a strict complementarian marriage, they're probably not going to be looking for something like the fair play method because they're living out strict gender roles.
Mhm.
And ideally in that situation, they're probably both happy and content with living in that strict gender rolled system. Um, but what I see happening often, what I see happening often is women are being told that they need to live in these strict gendered roles,
Mhm.
but they are being crushed under the weight of those responsibilities.
Mhm.
And let's call it, she is fair play curious or egalitarian curious. And because if you think about it, like the strict gender role complementarian, I mean, I want to be a man living in that system. He's got a maid. He just has to go to work, which he would have to do anyway. If,
Mhm.
even if he was single, he gets to come home and not think about anything else, right? So in that sort of setup where she's maybe getting a little curious about what might else be out there, what else, that was weird. What else might be out there? Like, what would you say to that couple about fair play?
I would say that they need to both do a little bit of research into it because the system. just in and of itself is not going to work if both partners are not on board. Fair play is not a system that one person is going to be able to unbalanced do because they're probably already shouldering the majority of the mental load in their house. And fair play really um, is not necessarily about making it 50-50, but making it feel equitable to both partners and making it so each partner has the same amount of time and free time. So if someone's partner is not on board, but you're curious, I would say read the book, watch the documentary, see if your partner will watch the documentary with you. That can be a good conversation starter, especially if you've had some conflict before around mental load, or sometimes people just think of it as chores. If you've had trouble, if you've had conflict around chores in your house, and it's way more than chores to be clear, but if you've had some conflict, you can say, hey, I heard about this thing. Let's watch this documentary together and see if this might be a good system for us to try out.
And when we talk about like there's conflict around chores, a lot
Mhm.
of times we hear a response of, "Well, just make me a list. I will totally help you do whatever you need to get done in this house, but I just don't know what needs done. Just make me a list and I'll do it."
Mhm. Yeah, so the making of the list is part of the mental load. So it doesn't really work to just make a list because then you're not actually offloading any of the mental load part from your partner. You're just offloading the like execution of the task. It's not the full task. That doesn't do anything with the mental load. The other piece about that too is that a lot of this stuff is learned skills. So we think women are better at this, and if we are, we get socialized to be better at noticing these things. Um, but it's learned skills. So you can learn to notice, hmm, the season's changing. It's starting to get a little colder. Maybe we need to swap out the coats from the summer coats to the fall winter coats, right? Like noticing, you can build that skill.
My response, um, so I have a tween boy in the house. And so sometimes when I get that sort of, I just didn't notice it, or I don't know. One of the big ones is, "You're just better at this than I am, Mom." And my response to that is, "Well, that sounds like you need more practice at doing this. So guess what? This is your job until you are proficient." Um, and I'm not saying that you treat your husband like my 11-year-old, but there is a lesson to be learned there
Sure.
for sure. I struggle talking about this subject because I see this played out in marriages over and over and over again. And when couples come to me for coaching, almost inevitably, mental load and domestic labor is somehow brought into the equation at some point in the conversation. Because a lot of times, one of my first questions with coaching is, "When was the last time you had fun together?" And usually her response is, "I'm too tired for that because I'm drowning under all of these other things." And so, why is it that you think so many Christian couples are struggling to divide the emotional labor, the mental load, all of this in a more equitable and fair setup?
I mean, I really think that points to a lot of the culture that we're in, right? And a lot more of the patriarchal messages and the patriarchal infiltration of Christian theology. And so, and then we're kind of in echo chambers, right? So if you're in a church group or a women's Bible study that is not challenging some of those messaging, or even in a men's Bible study. It doesn't even matter. If you're not in some sort of setting where you're relearning some of those pieces or digging a little deeper or understanding some of the original theology pieces, and you're just kind of taking what you're hearing and going with that, it's going to come out in ways like this. So, I mean, like, especially for Christian women and couples, there's so much patriarchal influence in our culture of how we're interpreting the Bible and what it means and looks like to be a Christian. Um, I think that's the largest problem, to be very honest, because without that, God says people are equal.
This is a really great point in the conversation to bring up a comment that I received on one of my videos the last time that I was talking about mental load and domestic labor. The original comment had said, talking about mental load and domestic labor is secular thinking wrapped in Christian language to to desire an equitable division of labor. I made a response video and not even directly addressing that, but I said this is a thought-stopping argument. When you say XYZ is secular thinking wrapped in Christian language, that statement is designed to stop people from thinking critically about the subject because they're afraid of sinning. You are basically telling someone that they are sinning, but this person came back and said it's not actually, it's an accurate label. Mental load and all of that is directly from feminist theory, and feminist theory denies there are significant differences between men and women. It's not about dishes. Women can work and all the rest, but women and men are not the exact same. And the only difference between with the only difference between reproductive organs. So, do you think that having these like there's a lot of theology and secular labor and all of these things. So, I'd love to know what your response to those comments would be.
Yeah, gosh, those are so hard. I think a lot of times when people are commenting like that, there is a misunderstanding of God's view of women and also men,
Yes.
right? Because then we are just foobarring the whole thing. So, but there's a deep misunderstanding of God's love for women and value for women and creation of women as equal people. So I think like that really is like a starting block for acknowledging or hearing or responding to some of like comments like that. And with that in mind, I mean, I think a lot of people would do really, really well to re-examine what they think that they know about women and about and about how God created them. So I two books that come to mind are Beth Allison Barr's The Making of Biblical Womanhood. And she writes a
Yes.
lot about like I think that's such a fantastic book. I wish it was required reading. Everyone should study that. And then who is the other one? His name is escaping me. I want to say Philip Payne's book. Um, I could be wrong about that. I'll look that up. But he basically wrote a book and he had all this training and growing up and socialization that women are to be in these kind of gendered roles, right? And complementarian.
Right.
He kind of set out to prove that that was the way that God intended. And in writing that and in studying the theology, God convinced him otherwise. So then his book is just excellent. So I think like they're just culturally, we need to re-examine what we think about women and how we're holding them. So that is the first basis. At some point, when you get through that and see that people are equal and that patriarchy is a human system, not a divine system, not part of Christianity, not given to us by God, that's going to pave the way for more equal pieces to come through.
I think, and really piggybacking off of what you're saying, in the book, she actually talks about men's time is seen as having a monetary value, and
Mhm.
women's time is seen as having no monetary value,
Mhm.
or a lesser monetary value, and therefore men's time is perceived as more valuable.
Yep. There's a lot
And
of toxic time messages.
yeah, and that kind of leads into this next piece of what are some of the signs that the emotional labor or the mental load is unevenly distributed in a marriage, especially if one or both partners think they're doing their part, they're I'm
Mhm.
doing what I'm supposed to do to be a good wife or a good husband. So what are
Yeah,
some of those signs?
there's a lot of them. So I think on the outside, you can look, do both partners have relatively equal free time in their week, time to do something fun or creative or a hobby or something that's, pleasurable or meaningful to them just as a person, not part of their role as mom or wife. Um, and so do people have roughly equal time to pursue hobbies, interests, fun things? That would be kind of one on the surface thing. I also think language can be a really sneaky one. So when we're hearing words like babysitting, he's babysitting the kids.
Blech.
This parenting. You made those kids, they're yours too. That's parenting. Or I'm helping her, or, so language like that, that isn't describing that this is my task, this is my responsibility, I own this. So we can kind of hear it in people's language sometimes.
The
On
helping one, I have to, I have, I'm, I'm sorry. I
the,
wasn't gonna, the helping is one of my biggest pet peeves
hmm
because that you are, I want this to be explicitly understood. Help implies a favor. Help implies that I have no responsibility for doing the dishes. That is solely your responsibility. I never have to be responsible for it. Therefore, I never have to think about it. I never have to actually do it unless you ask me to help you. And I
hmm
am doing you a favor. And what do we
There's an
think of
entitlement
favors?
there.
Yeah. What do we think of favors sort of culturally? We as Americans don't like this sense of owing other people, right? So if he has now done me a favor by doing the dishes, there's going to be this sort of, well, now I owe him something
Mhm.
because he helped me by doing me a favor and doing the dishes. And
Yeah.
then in my line of work, usually that comes up is, well, you should have sex with me because I did the dishes.
hmm
So,
Yes. Yeah. So I was gonna say, like the often more private ways we can tell is what are people's sex life like? Are they enjoying it? Do they feel like they have time for it? Are they too tired? Is the idea of chores a constant conflict for them that ends up kind of ruining their drive or their desire for sex? So we can really see like a whole range of symptoms, if you want to call them that, for when this is unbalanced. Resentment, sometimes, sometimes people, especially if they're on board and they're okay with the more typical gender roles, sometimes people feel fine with that for a while. But then as it goes on and the entitlement builds, then the resentment builds. So just some sneaky underlying emotional experiences too.
yeah. So growing up, my grandparents were one of the healthiest marriages that I had modeled for me, but they had a very traditional 50s housewife gender role sort of marriage. Um, my grandfather, I don't ever remember him doing housework until my grandmother got cancer and was bedridden, couldn't get up. Um, I don't ever like he would grill out, you know, but the all the women would be in the kitchen like preparing the food to take out for him to put onto the grill. That was it.
Yeah.
And so like when we got married, I was perfectly happy to cosplay a little 50s housewife sort
Mhm.
of thing. And then after not too long, I was like, this is stupid. I don't like this at all. So we had to make some adjustments, and that was a rough learning curve. But sometimes it can be fun to cosplay a little 50s housewife kinky sort of thing. Go for it. But recognize that for what it is. Just my little contribution to that. Um, So how does, I mean, you have said that, if someone, like the chores fight could be impacting their libido, the conflict from that. Do you see that showing up in the bedroom in any other ways? Is there even more of an impact that you see in that area?
I think sometimes, yeah, I mean, because that can kind of extend beyond like you're caring for your physical home to the mental labor, the emotional labor going into foreplay or making sure both partners are getting equal pleasure. So I think it can kind of creep in into other ways.
Yeah, the foreplay one is a huge one that I see. You know what the other
Mhm.
one that I see is?
Mhm.
If she feels like he's one more thing on her to-do list.
Sure. Yeah.
That's not sexy.
Hmm.
Or the make me a list. You know who I make lists for? My 11-year-old.
Hmm.
If you are putting yourself on the same level as my 11-year-old, I don't want to do my kid. Like
Yeah. We
that's
are
not
not meant
sexy.
we are not meant to parent our partner.
Yeah.
No.
That's definitely one of the ways that I see that show up.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about like the actual fair play method. We've thrown around a lot of buzzwords, mental
Sure.
load and domestic labor and emotional labor and fair play and
Hmm.
equitable. But like what is fair play? What
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah. Love this question. So it's a system, and there's cards. There's a book, you can read about it. There's also a deck of cards. So it's kind of a gamified system, built on systems kind of in the workplace. So how do good, healthy systems function? It's kind of applying some of that to home life. Um, Lots of kind of key principles. Visibility equals value. So if work isn't seen, it's not valued. So one core part of fair play, and what we're doing with all these cards is kind of bringing to life, making visible a lot of the stuff that's on, just in your head. It's usually in your head. It's not written down somewhere. Um, And what else? There's a whole bunch of cards. There's 100 cards. They're divided into, I think, five different categories. And you can kind of build your deck with your partner and kind of see who's carrying what task. Another kind of key principle is that if one person is responsible for each task, one person would be fully responsible for. So if I hold the card for taking out the trash, which is funny. That's not a card I hold in my house. But if I hold that card, then I am responsible for the entire mental load arc of that, which is the conceptualizing of that task, the planning for it, and the execution. So all three components I would be responsible for. Um,
Can you walk us through what that, so taking out the trash
mhm.
and, you're saying, well, there's three parts. There's the conceptualizing, the planning and the execution. And I
Yeah.
know there's a lot of people going, the trash is full, I take it out, I'm done. But
But there's a lot of people who don't do that, or there's a lot of people who, if
but
it's not
there's
my
more.
problem, I'm not taking it out.
But also, can you walk us through because there's more than just noticing the trash is full and taking it out. There's more
Mhm.
to it than that. So
Yeah,
can you walk us through like
yeah.
I think that's a great example to help people understand conception, planning, and execution is so
Mhm.
much more nuanced than just doing the thing.
Yes. So conceptualizing, this is all like the behind the scenes stuff. So this
Hmm.
is literally just thinking, which sometimes is the skill to build, like noticing that the trash is full and taking it out. That's kind of the skill there. Um, the next part of that planning, that would be like, okay, our trash day is on Wednesday, so it's Tuesday night after I'm done with work for the day. I'm gonna go around and get all of the trash and put it outside. That's also part of like the executing part would be actually doing it, but the planning part would be leaving time and space to do that and make sure you're doing that. Executing, putting the trash out on the curb, rolling it down the end of the driveway, bringing it back in. For us, that's part of the same task, but some people might have that divided differently. But some more, times when it could be more complicated than that. What if you're going on vacation and you have a bunch of stinky food and it's going to sit, your vacation isn't timing up with when trash day is, so all this stinky food is going to sit in your garage for a week and then you're going to come home to a smell. That's not a great scenario. So it's kind of a silly one, but conceptualizing would also be like, okay, what do I need to throw out? Do we have bags? Kind of all of the parts and pieces of that. We had to get stickers for our yard waste recently. So like, do we have the right stickers on the trash cans? Do we have enough trash cans? Calling the people if you have a bulk pickup or something. So all these different parts and pieces could go into just this one seemingly simple task.
My favorite is always like the trash pickup after Christmas, and
Mhm.
managing how many bags are going to fit in the can.
Mhm.
Um, you know, things like, do y'all keep, in Ohio, we still have plastic bags at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So, like, do y'all keep your plastic bags for trash? Things like that are all part of the planning that, like, maybe he's the one who sees the trash, takes it out, but does he notice if the trash bags are low?
Mhm.
Last night was trash night in our house, and I hear my husband go, I don't know why the trash can in mom's office doesn't have a bag in it. And I turned around, I said, well, nobody put a bag in it last week. And you're normally the one that takes the trash out of my office. And my husband goes, yeah, but I asked the 11-year-old to handle it last week. I'm like, okay, so between the two of you, somebody failed execution there.
Yeah.
And I mean, failed, I, somebody also failed at noticing for an entire week that there was no bag in there. So that was, also part of planning and
Sure.
failure. So that's a really good example of that.
Mhm.
Okay, so the system makes the invisible visible. It
Mhm.
gives each partner ownership over the entirety of a task or helps them talk about how they're going to handle a task. But what about for the people, I'm gonna just say it, the men in my comments were like, y'all are making this more complicated than it has to be. You're doing this to yourselves. It is not that serious. Nobody cares about XYZ. That's not something that needs to be done. And whether that's like wiping down the baseboards or
Mhm.
some of the smaller things. So like,
Yeah.
how are we handling that sort of thing where one partner is saying, that doesn't matter. Why
Yeah.
are you doing this to yourself?
So in those times, we have a difference in what each partner is probably considering as the minimum standard of care, which is another fair play term. So if I have the idea that cleaning the bathroom involves also wiping down the baseboards, and if my husband doesn't, I'm gonna be mad at him if he cleans the bathroom and doesn't do this thing that I think is part of that task. So usually people we're all coming into marriage and relationships with our own set of ideas, expectations, etc. But where see conflict is where we haven't together decided as a couple what is our minimum standard of care for our family and actually defining that. So fair play can help define some of those things. And again, just some of that is making something more visible. And sometimes some people are going to have to raise their standards, some people are going to have to adjust theirs and lower them. You're going to meet in the middle somewhere. Um, and your minimum standard of care is going to depend on what your family values and why. That's another really important part of fair play and kind of setting this all up is why are we doing all of this? Some people might not care about baseboards. I grew up in a house that was like a museum. We cared about baseboards. I care about baseboards now. But not everybody does, and that's okay. But we can't like not have conversations about that. And we shouldn't not be on the same page with our partner to some degree about some of those things.
I care about baseboards when I notice that there's an issue with the baseboards.
Well, I care about everything. I care
That's
about baseboards. I care about the inside of the microwave being clean. There is way too much I care about. The bottom of the trash can being clean, way too much. So some of those things, for those men in those comments, some of those things, sure. Am I putting that on myself? Yes.
yes.
But also, this is a yes and conversation. Sure, for some of those things. And also, there is a there is a gross distribution of labor that is unbalanced, most of the case towards women for this.
And with that said, what would you say to a wife who feels guilty for even asking for a more balanced distribution because she's been taught things like a good wife doesn't complain or has been told that asking for a greater contribution is nagging? That's when I see all the time nagging used as a way to shut down
Mhm.
women. Like any request or complaint is just labeled nagging so that the person doesn't have to respond. So what about that? What about that woman who just has carries that guilt?
Yeah, that is an unfair use of that term. So, gosh, I think it depends more on the situation, to be honest, because if there's not emotional safety in their relationship, I'm going to have answer that a whole different way than if there is, right? And emotional safety is a first piece for having any of this system work or implementing it. So let's assume best case scenario. This is an emotionally safe
Yes. Yes.
marriage or relationship. In that case, we might kind of explore like just her own ideas around complaining or see if she can further define that or kind of pick apart some where did you get some of those beliefs? Are they ones you still hold? Um, might have her kind of reframe it as this isn't complaining, it's actually being honest and vulnerable with your partner and what if we put this into some other context? Would you not make your physical needs known? If you had broken your arm, would you not say, I need to go see someone right now? You would probably not do that, right? So if we put it into some other context where it would be more visible, the need, what would you do? How would you respond? If you needed gas in your car, would you go get that? Or would you just, I can't go get gas? That doesn't make sense. So if we put it into some other context, how would you respond to that?
Okay. So I can't help I this I can get it together. I,
Can't
I
wait.
literally was just reading this thread where someone had collected these stories of all of these women who put off getting care for their physical health because they literally had zero support in their home to do so. Like women
Mhm.
putting off surgeries for months and years because their husband would not watch the children.
Mhm.
Women having
Would not
horrible,
parent his children.
yeah, it would not
I'm gonna
parent his
correct you
children.
there.
Exactly. Exactly. We use watch as a neutral term in our
Sure,
home.
sure.
But other family, it is not neutral
Mhm.
universally. So you are correct that it is parenting.
Sure.
But yeah, like that just brings up for me, I'm like, okay, but there are women who literally will
Yeah.
sacrifice their physical bodies too, and that's a whole other conversation. Okay. Um,
And that's sad. That's so sad. That is a travesty, right? If you were,
yes.
and that's one of the fair play cards, self-care. That is your doctor's appointments, your hair appointments, your dentist. That's not like, massages and spa days. It could be if you wanted, but basic self-care, when we're actually using that term how it was meant to be used, is caring for yourself going to the doctor as needed, taking your meds as prescribed, all of these like really boring self-care pieces. So if people are not having time to go properly care for themselves, big red flag that some of this is off.
Yes. And I want to acknowledge that the economy is in the toilet right now. And so sometimes there are valid, like, economic and practical concerns. But
Sure.
if it's just my husband throws a temper tantrum, if I need to go to the doctor and I ask him to keep the kids with him, like,
It's not the same.
that's not
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah.
Or if you feel
Finances
like
or other
I have
barriers, but
I have friends who legitimately are concerned about the safety of their children when their husband has the children. And I'm not talking about like she's neurotic.
mhm,
I'm talking about like it I have witnessed things that are gross levels of unsupervision, and that's all part of this as well.
it is, yeah. And again, to learn skill, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh, for
socialize.
sure.
Girls usually go, I remember taking a babysitting class. I don't even know if they still do that anymore, but
Yes,
we
they
took
do, but I
babysitting
did the same
classes.
thing. Yes.
Yeah, we're the ones out there taking CPR classes for the babysitting. We're babysitting, we're learning those skills. We're getting little preteen jobs as mother's helpers, right? So like we are learning from a very young age a lot of these skills. Men often don't have that same kind of socialization and that like practiced learning for years and years and years. So it's a learned skill, but
And
they
it's
get
and
it quick.
yeah, well, and it's okay to acknowledge that like you were failed by society and you were not taught those things. Like this is not man bashing. This is you were failed by society, but acknowledge it and learn.
Yeah.
Ask Google it. Like there's so many things out there. Don't and that gets into okay, I have so one thing I'm going to say real quick, but then I have another valid question. It starts
Okay.
even earlier than 12-year-old girls taking babysitting classes because if you think that your baby boy cannot play with dolls because those are a girl's toy, that's when it starts.
Sure.
I bought my oldest son a doll when he was like 13, 14 months old. I handed it like he was eyeing them in the store. I handed it to him. It was a little soft body and he held it, like he brought it in for a hug and he snuggled it and it was adorable and it just so happened the only color available was pink and my husband had a moment. And then
Hmm.
I had a moment. And then he got over his moment real quick
Yeah.
because I was like, this is let go of your toxic
Yeah.
masculinity socialization. Little boys can play with dolls just like little boys can play with play
Sure.
kitchens. Gordon Ramsay probably maybe had a play kitchen when he was two. It's
Yeah.
okay.
But even with that, like before their preteens also, what are the kids witnessing with their parents? Do they see that maybe one person cooks, the other person cleans? Do they see one task always falling to one person? So, I mean, they'll pick up on that really quick too, just from watching and growing up.
But also the chores that we have, the care tasks, whatever,
Mhm.
that we are having our children do. Are we gendering them among our children as well? I have said from day one, I am not raising any helpless husbands in my household. So, from a very early age, I have had my sons in the kitchen cooking and learning how to do dishes.
Mhm.
Literally, my oldest son was doing his own laundry fully independently by the age of 6
Yeah,
because
these are life
no
skills.
helpless husbands.
Yeah, they're life skills, right? It's
Yes.
not just gendered skills. These are skills to be a functioning adult.
And he might not ever get married. So he's going to have to know how to do these things
Hmm.
regardless of whether he has a wife or not. And I
Yeah.
don't want my wife resenting me because he did not get delivered as a fully formed human
Mhm.
upon delivery. All of that goes to I mean, like you can bring that back to the mental load of parenting in fair play? Who's researching parenting methods? Who's reading parenting books? Who
Hmm.
is who is bringing up the discussions? What are our parenting goals?
Yeah. I will say there is a significant amount of increased mental load with having kids. And I think you can see that in the Fair Play cards. If you were even just kind of looking at the cards, my husband and I, we do not have kids. And I did make him practice a lot of the Fair Play stuff with me when I was first learning it. And we mapped out all the cards. Because we don't have kids, we pulled out all these cards, right, that don't apply to our lives. And it was really shocking to see right? Because again, what's not seen here? The amount of cards that are only going to be in someone's deck when you have a kid was significant. I mean, I don't want to say like a third of the deck, but it was a lot of the cards. So even just like the act of becoming and the role of becoming parents is going to heap on a whole other additional layer of mental load that people don't have to deal with or aren't prepared for until you're in that spot. But you're right, a lot of times it's the women who are getting the baby books, the women who are getting the baby showers, the women who are making the list of the baby things that we need, right? So and they'll suggest a book to their husbands, but where is his research in those things? It's not balanced.
Very. And then these women get to perimenopause and the whole system collapses.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's move on to this one. One of the things that I have heard people say in sort of opposition to fair play is it is still relying on the invisible labor of women to sort of initiate the conversation, to prod her husband into reading the book or watching the, getting ordering the
Mhm.
cards and all of that sort of thing. Um, how would you respond to that?
I think that that's valid, right? Because especially if we haven't yet had a conversation and haven't yet started more equitably distributing those tasks, it probably is going to fall to the woman because she's probably feeling overwhelmed, overburdened, doesn't have time. They're probably having conflicts about some of these things. So it unfortunately probably is going to fall to her to initiate some of this change.
So with that being said, what sort of motivation would men in these situations have to engage in redistributing the mental load? Because right now, things are probably working pretty well from his perspective. So where's
Mhm.
his motivation in all of this?
Do you want a good marriage? Do you want a happy, healthy wife and family? Right? So it's got to be an internal motivation because he is he is usually benefiting unfairly from her unpaid, unseen labor. And I do think it does require gosh, like a level of humility for a man to realize, ooh, this is an area I've dropped the ball and haven't been supporting my partner in ways that I should. That requires humility. No, and no one likes to admit when they've messed up or dropped the ball or hurt their partner. So I do think it requires like a certain level of emotional maturity and humility for men to see what the real problem is and to be motivated to do something about it. I think they're going to have to be intrinsically motivated of, this is going to be good for my whole house, for my wife, for my relationship. Um, this is going to have there be less conflict. It can't be kind of like you were saying earlier. I think this is going to get me more sex. Like that's not a good motivator. That's not going to be it. This is not a system like that.
This is not chore play. You don't get to insert the token of doing the dishes and get sex out of the vending machine.
Did you just make that up just now?
No, chore play? No,
Okay.
that is a commonly used
That's
term on the
really
internet.
funny. Okay. Well, that's great.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not that.
I love that you are not chronically online like I am.
I hate it. Listen, I was gonna delete my social media stuff and then I started a business and I was like, oh, I probably have to keep this. I hate it.
There's certain like TikToks that go around and people in the comments will be like, you only get this if you're chronically online like I am. And I'm like, gosh darn it, I need to get off the internet more.
Fair.
Okay. All right. Last question, maybe we'll see what the ADHD does. What's the biggest misconception that you hear about fair play, and how do you help people move past it?
I mean, I think we've already kind of talked about those. Like the biggest misconception is that these are gendered tasks or gendered or these tasks should be gendered would be one. And probably another one that it has to be equal. It should be
Hmm.
50-50. That's another misconception. We're not shooting for 50-50. We're shooting for a felt sense of equity, which is different. If one, so we've got these 100 cards, and if you're dividing, let's assume you somehow need all 100 of these cards in your life, which if you have kids, you might. So if you've got all these cards, we're not shooting for dividing them between 50-50, but one person could have 70 and the other person could have 30. Each card kind of carries its own weight to it, and based on the person's preference or just interest or capacity, like one card might carry weight for one person and not the other person. So we're shooting not for 50-50, but a felt sense of this is equal in our home and it's more equitable. Um, we're playing for fairness. Yeah. Trying to think what other misconceptions.
I think one of the things that, especially in the circles that I tend to move in,
Mhm.
where the majority of the women are stay-at-home moms or work from home moms, there's this idea that, well, you're the at-home parent, you
Mhm.
should be handling all of these things. I like to point out that just because she is physically in the house for a greater period of time does not make the entirety of household labor her responsibility. Her
Yeah.
responsibility is raising your children, and that's a lot. Some days there is not a single thing that can be picked up off the floor because
Mhm.
someone is screaming or destroying or puking or something uh,
Yeah.
with that. And so, and also, like, there are things that you would have to, if you were single, you'd have to do your laundry, you'd have to do your dishes, you'd have to occasionally wipe the toilet in theory.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think other common misconceptions too. What about we just outsource it? Can we just pay someone else to do this? That can work for a little bit of time, but it's not always possible for a lot of reasons, and still doesn't get rid of the problem because then who's scheduling that person? That's part of the mental load. But yeah, you're totally right too. Just and I would say I hear the same thing from people who work from home or work from home full time or most of the time. Just because I'm physically in the house, it can be really easy to kind of slowly take on these tasks or have them kind of fall to me. And yeah, that's why another term for this is she fault is because it just sort of gets by default dumped onto the women. So yeah, but everybody's time is created equal, and parenting is a lot of hard work.
yes, yes, it is.
Hmm.
Okay, so this will actually be the last question.
Final
Um,
question.
yeah, for real this time, for realsies, we'll see. For couples who want to start moving towards a more equitable distribution, but
Mhm.
they feel overwhelmed. Girl, same. What is one simple first step that they can take this week?
Watch the Fair Play documentary. If you haven't watched it, that'll be like a good kind of intro. Um, purchase the cards. So there's two things, but do one of those two things. Purchase the deck of cards or watch the documentary as your very first step.
Girl, I set you up perfectly for you to be like, contact me to set up fair play coaching. That
Okay,
was
but
your
I would
chance.
also say that too. Can I
That was
say that
your chance.
still? Okay, also call me because I love helping couples figure this out.
Okay, this will for sure actually be the last question for real this time. What does a fair play coach do? Legitimately. It's an
Great
actual
question.
question.
Yeah. Yeah, I help couples figure out how to implement the fair play system in their life. So we overcome whatever roadblocks are in the way to doing that, whether it's toxic time messages or some of maybe these spiritual pieces and ideas around whose job is what. And some of it is like just the practical, like how do we use this system? We get that there's cards, but how do we use them? And a lot of times I'll help couples really dig into the why and help them name and describe their minimum standard of care. So fair play coaching is just some extra support to help implement the system in your home.
Thank you, Erin, so much for being here and for helping to demystify mental load and domestic labor and all of the internet buzzwords that are not, in fact, feminist theory.
That is true. They're just being an adult.
If you all, Erin is a fair play coach and she is available to do fair play coaching, whether you are in Ohio or not.
Mhm.
So if you need some support figuring out who's going to do the dishes tomorrow, hit her up and she will be happy to support you so that you guys can go have good sex. I hope this conversation helped you see that a more balanced marriage isn't secular thinking wrapped in Christian language. It's kingdom work. Because when both partners are rested, respected, and connected, there's more room for joy, generosity, and of course, good sex. If you loved this episode, share it with a friend or your husband. Tag me on socials at The Christian Sexpert and let me know your biggest takeaway. If you're ready to dig deeper in your own marriage rhythms, check out my resources at thechristiansexpert.com, including my intimacy tools and one-to-one coaching. Until next time, I'm Angela reminding you to go build connection, go build trust, and go have good sex. That's it for today's episode. You've been blessed and probably slightly scandalized. Now, go journal, go text your man, and most of all, don't keep this to yourself. Share it, review it, slide into my DMs. Then grab a journal, a game, or a coaching spot. And remember, Jesus didn't die for you to have boring sex. So go have good sex already.